So, some massive breaking news just dropped out of Beijing. Former Chinese Premier Zhu Rongji has passed away at the age of 98. This really marks the close of a defining chapter in modern history, mostly because he was absolutely one of the key figures behind China's staggering economic transformation back in the late 20th century.
Okay, let's dive into this. 98. Living for nearly a century means his life ran entirely parallel to the immense, turbulent shifts of modern China. He's the guy who ultimately engineered policies that completely reshaped the global economy. Policies that literally created the massive global supply chains and international markets that we all rely on today. He wasn't just a bystander to history, you know? He was the one holding the blueprint when the nation decided to pivot its entire economic trajectory.
To understand his impact, here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, the death of an architect. Second, from exile to power. Third, the bold economic overhaul. Fourth, entering the global market. Fifth, the heavy cost of reform. And finally, a complicated global legacy.
Let's start with Section 1, the death of an architect, the passing of a transformative figure.
You see, losing Zhu Rongji isn't just about a former official passing away. It really represents the departure of a historically transformative figure. As premier from 1998 to 2003, he steered the country through an era of unprecedented, rapid, double-digit economic expansion. This was a critical 5-year window that aggressively laid the essential foundations for the global superpower we see today. Moving right along to Section 2, from exile to power, a dramatic rise, fall, and return.
We really have to look at the backstory here, because his path to the premiership was anything but a straight line. Now, what's really interesting about this timeline is the sheer turbulence of his career. He actually joined the Communist Party in 1949, which is the exact same year the People's Republic of China was established. But by 1958, after criticizing Mao Zedong's economic policies, his career was totally derailed. He was labeled a rightist and purged. It wasn't until after Mao's death in 1976 that he was finally rehabilitated. Then, rising super rapidly through the ranks, he became the mayor of Shanghai in 1987, where he tackled massive housing problems and helped set the stage for the city to become a global financial hub, before moving on to the central government in 1991.
And his personal life? Just as wild as his political one. He was born into an intellectual, wealthy landowning family in Hunan province and actually graduated from the prestigious Tsinghua University. Yet, despite those highly elite beginnings, he spent years facing severe political persecution during the Cultural Revolution, even being sent off to do hard labor in the countryside. So he intimately knew both the absolute highs of elite academia and the absolute lows of rural, grueling labor. Fast forward to 1997. After taking charge of the central bank, he's poised to succeed Premier Li Peng. And in 1998, as the sole candidate for premier, his political dominance was just overwhelming. Out of thousands of ballots, he secured 2,890 votes in favor. There were just 31 abstentions and a tiny 29 votes against. After all those years of exile, he achieved a nearly unanimous mandate to completely change the country.
Section 3. The bold economic overhaul, restructuring a state-dominated economy.
Armed with that massive mandate, Zhu got to work restructuring a rigid, state-dominated system. So the crucial point is exactly how he engineered this massive shift. Having already cooled down an overheating economy in the early 1990s, he launched these sweeping, genuinely painful reforms as premier. We're talking about shutting down or privatizing highly inefficient state-owned companies and pulling tax powers back from local governments to the central state. Most fundamentally, he launched housing ownership reforms, which pretty much created the bedrock for China's massive real estate boom, a boom that still drastically impacts global markets today.
You know, to push through changes of that magnitude, you really need a specific kind of personality. And Zhu absolutely had it. The sources note he was widely known for a very blunt, direct, and sometimes quite forceful style. He was an incredibly decisive policymaker. Naturally, going in and shutting down local power bases made him pretty unpopular with certain parts of the bureaucracy. But at the exact same time, this direct, no-nonsense approach made him one of the most recognizable economic managers of his generation. I mean, he literally became a household name. Part 4. Entering the global market. Integrating China into the world economy. His most enduring achievement on the world stage definitely came in 2002 when he secured entry into the World Trade Organization. The internal debate leading up to this was intense, to put it mildly. There were genuine fears among Chinese officials that accepting the painful domestic concessions required by the WTO would expose their domestic industries to crushing external pressure. But Zhu pushed ahead anyway. And the reality? It became the essential, decisive move toward global trade integration that rapidly accelerated the country's emergence as a major economic powerhouse. To pull a deal like that off and secure that WTO membership, Zhu had to operate at the absolute highest levels of global diplomacy. We're talking staggering meetings with U.S. presidents, Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, Russian leaders Boris Yeltsin and Vladimir Putin, not to mention Nelson Mandela, Fidel Castro, and Yasser Arafat. His meetings with Washington in particular were absolutely vital for managing complicated relations and ensuring that the door to the global market remained wide open.
Section 5. The heavy cost of reform. The social toll of economic restructuring.
Now, we really can't discuss these achievements without addressing the dual reality of his legacy. Because look, restructuring on this scale, it never comes free. And this brilliantly illustrates that exact point. On one hand, you have the rapid modernization, unprecedented double-digit growth, and massive real estate expansion. But on the flip side, the social hardship was just immense. Closing all those inefficient state-owned enterprises resulted in massive, large-scale layoffs and widespread job losses across the country. The transition was incredibly painful for millions of everyday workers.
And critics are super clear on this point. As the sources explicitly state, mistakes in areas including grain policy, taxation, and state factory restructuring created systemic problems that later governments were essentially forced to clean up. The sheer speed and bluntness of his reforms definitely left deep, long-term social and economic challenges in their wake. Finally, Section 6, a complicated global legacy, remembering a decisive reformer. After all this, Zhu kind of faded from the public eye, making his final public appearance back in 2015. He attended a military parade in Beijing, marking 70 years since the end of World War II in Asia, standing right alongside former Prime Ministers Wen Jiabao and Li Peng. That image of him on the viewing stand essentially bookended his public life. His passing really marks the true end of an era for a specific generation of leaders, the ones who took a deeply isolated economy and decisively rewired the whole thing for the 21st century. So, Zhu Rongji leaves behind a legacy defined by rapid growth, harsh social costs, and a decisive move toward world integration. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. How do the painful but pivotal economic reforms Zhu Rongji pushed through in the 1990s continue to shape the global economy we live in today? It's a huge question, and understanding his life is just the first step to answering it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the headlines.